Mark. Good morning, Ways and Means. It is Friday, March 20th. Spring is tomorrow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
First day of spring.
Today.
So today,
Yes.
why does it like between the 20th and the?
That's how the equinox works.
Very
The moon and
confusing.
stars.
Anyway, it's 9:05. We are beginning our work for the day. The first thing we are hearing is some technical as a placement amendment from Representative Kimball and myself, and then we're going to look at and ideally vote on H 727, and then we are back here after lunch at 1 o'clock for H 650, and frankly, whatever else winds up there then. And with that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Charlie Kimball, representative from Woodstock, member of this committee. I'm here on H 928, and this is the bill that you would remember seeing. We offered an amendment to the bill that came out of House Environment. And what we discovered after we had passed the bill, and as I was on my way to explain what we had done to the bill to the House Environment Committee, is that the way that it was worded is it said of not more than the lowest fee for a big game tag in terms of the fees charged for licenses that we gave the provision, the director or the commissioner, the authority to issue a provisional fee. If they found themselves in between seasons and they needed to issue a fee because of what was going on with the management of a particular herd of animals. But it turns out that the fee that is the lowest was on the list is a $5 bear tag fee. So the committee and environment said that's really too low. They thought that what they intended with their original bill is the prevailing rate, which was really kind of an obscure term because prevailing, we have a moose fee on here for a license for $100. Is that the prevailing fee? So with some further discussion with them, they said, well, we're really trying to just determine that it's the same fee for the same type of animal. Like, oh, okay. So that's what this whole amendment is. Just very clearly states that the department can issue a new license, a provisional fee for a license, as long as it's the same fee for the equal or similar to the same fee for the same type of animal. That's the whole thing. So if it's a deer, it's $23. If it's a moose, it's $100. Bear tag is interesting. I learned that it's the extension of the season, either early bear season or late bear season. So you can extend the use of your bear tag. So that's not necessarily a new bear. So that's the whole amendment.
Thanks, Charlie. Does anyone have any questions for Representative Kimball?
Please catch.
The art of compromise.
Can I have a motion to,
I didn't,
yeah,
I was fine. I was following you until you said the art of compromise. There was clarification, really.
Yes, the compromise between committees, when we were offering an amendment that would have changed it from what they understood it to be. So it's going back to them and trying to figure out an elegant way to make it what they intended to was a compromise in that process. That's all. Not the substance.
it all is basically the same thing,
It is,
except for, yeah.
but it makes it, everybody makes it clear.
I move that we find this amendment friendly.
Thank you so much. Representative Canfield moves that we find this amendment friendly. Representative Odie seconds. Straw poll. All those in favor?
How many of us are there here today? We're missing 11 or 8.
Great, thanks. 800. Nope, that's not how it works. 803.
Oh, right. Sorry.
Oh, I thought that was me, but in fact.
I
you said
think
that too.
I think I said 2 and
Great.
it got stuck in your brain. Yeah.
Okay. We are going to move to H 727, an act relating to sustainable data center deployment. Maria Royal, hello.
Hi, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Morning.
So I know you don't have a ton of time. What would be the best approach? Do you want me to walk through the bill, share my screen, give some background, do a broad
I'd like you
overview?
to do all of those things.
Okay, then.
Start with a broad overview and then share your screen and walk us through section by section, not word by word.
Got it.
Thanks.
Okay. So in terms of a broad overview, this bill concerns what are called AI data centers. These are basically warehouses that are filled with racks that contain servers, which are huge computers, that are filled with lots of IT hardware, but specifically high performance computer chips. In other words, a lot of computing power, and that is necessary for AI training and inference. So what's significant about these data centers is because of the computing that's involved, not only does it require a lot of power to operate, but it also generates a lot of heat. The data processing generates a lot of heat, so it requires some water for cooling. So in terms of this bill is the threshold for when this bill would apply in terms of the regulations is 20 megawatts of power. So a data center that uses 20 megawatts of power would meet the threshold that then would be subject to the requirements of this bill. So just generally in terms of what a 20 megawatt data center requires, in addition to the land, which is usually somewhere between 10 and 40 acres, and the building itself, there is, as I mentioned, the energy consumption, and that can be, when you talk about 20 megawatts, that could be enough to provide service to 15,000 to 20,000 households. And in terms of the water consumption, I think it's about 500,000 gallons of water a day, which is about enough to serve 1,500 households. So that's just kind of a broad view. And because of all of these factors, there are a number of concerns, the obvious being meeting the electricity demand, the large load, the electric load, ensuring that other ratepayers are not on the hook for any costs necessary for meeting that load in terms of the infrastructure, building new infrastructure, finding new energy resources. Similar concerns with respect to water, the water consumption, and then generally just the environmental impact of these facilities. So the bill, in terms of the components of the bill, and I'll pull up the document now, just in terms of a broad overview of a structure of the bill. The first two sections deal with the energy component, the contracts between a data center and an electric utility. The next sections 3 and 4 are the land use components. These data centers that meet the definition, 20 megawatts of power capacity, they trigger Act 250 review. That's a requirement that's been put in here. And then there are specific requirements related to A&R water permits. In addition, there are some reporting requirements too, which I can talk about. So that's a broad overview of the bill. So we'll start first with the, as I mentioned, the contract between a data center and an electric utility. Those contracts are termed here large load service equity contracts. They're like other tariffs that a utility might have with a large load user, industrial users that require a lot of power. But this is tailored specifically to data centers. So in subsection B, well, I'll read the subsection A quickly. So the purpose of all of this is to ensure just and reasonable rates for all ratepayer classes, not just the data centers, and mitigate the risk of financial exposure to the distribution utility and existing ratepayers, mostly in terms of cost and grid reliability. And to do this by ensuring that there are specific terms in every contract. And so that's what subsection B is about. So there's a cost allocation method to make sure that the data centers pay for any infrastructure upgrades or any other costs related to meeting the high demand. The duration of the contract is specified, and in part that's because you'll see further down, or even actually, so I'm on page 3, subdivision 3, the duration of the contract. Subdivision 4 is basically saying, okay, so you're going to come in, you're going to agree to serve for this, or you intend to serve for this length of time, but we want you to commit to buying a certain percentage of power for the duration of that contract. Again, trying to protect existing ratepayers from any unwarranted costs.
Maria?
Yeah,
We have a question here from Representative Odie.
sure.
That it's on sub 4. Okay, I get that, but, is there a protection for what, is that data centers there for even longer than what's in the contract? I'm concerned about long-term, like there's a contract and it's 10-year contract or something like that, and then what do you do if the data center's there another 20 years after that and it's hugely exploded in size and everything else? How do we protect our ratepayers from that?
Yep, that's a great question. So all of these contracts must be approved by the PUC, and the data center has to have a contract in place. So if the original 10-year contract expires, they would have to renew a contract and go through the same process, make sure that any additional costs, et cetera, any new load, and all of that would have to comply with these requirements and also meet PUC approval before they can take effect.
Thank you very much.
Representative Muslim.
Yeah, Maria, good morning. A little while back, you mentioned, large users, can't remember the terminology, but in the bill, there are other examples existing of large users that would fall under a similar thing, other with not the same explicit definition.
Yeah, so there
That
are,
makes sense.
yeah, it does. So there are other industrial users that have their own kind of tariffs. I was going to say Global Foundries, but Global Foundries is actually a little bit different because they used to be subject to a tariff with Green Mountain Power, but then they have actually they petitioned. I'm sorry, was there a question?
No, the screen flickered, but it came back, so
Oh,
you're
okay.
good.
Sorry. But they now are what's considered a self-managed utility. They created basically their own wholly owned subsidiary, which is their electric company that sells to Global Foundries. Anyway, that's a sidetrack. But other like ski resorts or Omya, there are industrial users and they tend to have their own tariffs or contracts. There are provisions, I'm not that familiar with it, but with respect to EV charging stations, I believe the PUC is developing a rate structure, or the utilities are developing a rate structure specific to those purposes. So those kinds of special contracts are not at all unusual in the state.
Thanks, Maria. Back to you and the walkthrough.
Okay, so again, in terms of protecting, I'm just looking on line 11, subdivision 6, protecting ratepayers. So the contract would include a collateral requirement sufficient to mitigate the risk of stranded costs. So if for some reason the data center is not operational as intended, that's the utility and the ratepayers aren't on the hook. So then that's some provisions related to demand side management. So this is all about trying to maintain grid reliability and stability. For example, if a data center can have storage on site or even their own generation, there may be ways to balance supply and demand just to protect the grid from any over demand on the system. So in terms of, subsection C basically says that the commission shall not approve a contract unless it finds that it will promote the general good of the state. And then in subsection D, what those specific findings are, will not adversely affect the power system, will result in an economic benefit to the state, and so on. And then consistent with all of the electrical planning that goes on currently. So that, significantly, I just wanted to go back. Sorry, I should not have skipped over this because this is one of the things this committee wants to probably look at. So on the actually the bottom of page 3, that's subdivision 8. The contract shall include provisions for the collection of gross receipts taxes, energy efficiency charges, and any other fees or charges that are applicable to electric revenue. So the gross receipts tax, this is what utilities end up paying to the department and to the PUC. They're basically regulatory fees, so a percentage of their revenue. The utility collects that percentage directly from the ratepayer and then in turn gives it to the regulator. So there's no increase here, but because of the new revenue, there'll be more fees going to the department and to the PUC. The energy efficiency charge is what most ratepayers pay on their electric bill to fund Efficiency Vermont and other weatherization efficiency programs. So I just wanted to flag that there are no additional fees, but just wanted you to be aware of that. And then probably, and so this would apply to all new data centers and any existing data centers. There are traditional data centers, small data centers in Vermont. I think there are 3 of them. Combined, they use less than 1 megawatt of power, I think like half a megawatt of power. So these would be data centers that don't use tremendous amount of computing power, and they perform services like web hosting and other cloud services. So section 3 is the hook for Act 250 review. It's just including these data centers under the definition of development that triggers the whole Act 250 review. Section 4 concern the A&R water permits. A number of provisions in here about the type of cooling centers, cooling systems that are needed. And not going to go through all of the details in there, but the Clean Water Act, monitoring for PFAS, having a plan that's approved by the Agency of Natural Resources regarding PFAS. There's a reporting requirement. This just has to do with looking at the availability or the changes in the renewable energy market to the extent new generation is needed and what's going to be available to meet the demand in the future. And then finally, a recommendation from the Department of Public Service on data center decommissioning. So the extent a site is no longer operational or is abandoned, that there is a plan in place to provide for basically any site remediation that needs to occur. So that is an overview of the bill. Did you have other questions for me?
I don't think so. Thank you.
Okay.
James, do you want to jump on up there? Or walk at whatever speed you prefer?
Sure.
All right,
Thanks for coming up here. It feels exciting that you got out
it's
of
this
our break.
session. James Duffy, Joint Fiscal Office. So overall, this bill is expected to have a minimal impact on state revenue. It would not appropriate funds or raise new state revenue. There are new established regulatory requirements at several state entities, those being the Public Service Department, Public Utility Commission, Agency of Natural Resources, and the Land Use Review Board, which would have a role in reviewing data center development. But JFO has communicated with these agencies. They expect those fiscal impacts to be minimal and to absorb those additional responsibilities contemplated in this bill with existing staffing. I'll just walk through each section briefly if that sounds good to you, Madam Chair. Section 1 This would establish the PUC's responsibility to review and approve large load service equity contracts to which data centers are required to enter with electricity, retail electricity providers. PUC has indicated that this could be accomplished with existing staff resources. Additionally, if there is at least one large load service equity contract established as of January 15th, 2028, Public Service Department would also be required to collaborate with the PUC and include energy, environmental, and economic impacts of data center construction and operation in the annual city comprehensive energy plan. That would also be expected to be absorbed by current staffing levels at Public Service Department. Act 3 establishes Act 250 jurisdiction over data center development. So it adds data center construction to the definition of development within Act 250. This could increase staffing demands on the Land Use Review Board permit review staff, including Act 250 application volume and associated fee revenue. But the Land Use Review Board anticipates that current staffing levels are sufficient to meet any additional demand for permit review. And I'll just note that the magnitude of any impacts to fee revenue, as is the case with many of the provisions here, really depend on how many data centers come to the state in the future and how many are captured under this bill that wouldn't otherwise be captured. Legislative Council pointed out that the minimum acreage size for many of these data centers is 10 acres, and that would already be captured under Act 250 jurisdiction on acreage alone, to say nothing of water demands or other Act 250 triggers. But as a maximum cap, these Act 250 permits are capped at $165,000 per application. If a data center paid the maximum permissible construction fee, that could represent an increase in Act 250 permit fund revenue by about 11% based on anticipated revenue in FY26.
But you said $165,000 for each application.
That is the statutory maximum for a permit, a construction permit under Act 250. So it could be much less, but 165, yes, 165 is the maximum. It's based on square footage of the construction, I believe, on a tiered basis.
Representative Muslim.
Yeah, thank you. Is there any anticipated bill back in these applications?
Could you please clarify?
Bill back is when the applicant has to pay the state for something, or, for various kind of studies and things that need to be done. I mean, if it comes up, I'm sure we hear about it, but there are bill backs in other applications that go for Act 250 when there are studies that are not anticipated, out there in the world, kind of stuff like that need to be completed before the decision-making body can issue a permit.
Maria,
Yes,
are there bill back provisions specific to this bill?
there are not any included in here. And I will say I'm not familiar with Act 250 and those bill back provisions. I know with respect to the PUC and the department, they do have bill back authority for particular proceedings. I'm not 100, this didn't get discussed at all, and I'm not 100% certain that a PUC investigation into the tariff would trigger the bill back authority. It might, but I can't say that for certain. I would have to talk to the PUC and see how they do apply that now.
Thank you, that's a good start.
Thanks.
Section 4 pertains to various water quality and water resource protection permits within the Agency of Natural Resources. This section specifies the applicability of various existing water quality and water resource permit programs. It would also require certain data centers to submit wastewater monitoring plans to the Agency of Natural Resources. These would include monitoring for PFAS substances. You may know these as forever chemicals, colloquially. We have communicated, we GFO have communicated with ANR. They don't anticipate these changes to dramatically or to meaningfully increase the universe of regulated entities or permit applicants. These would be very similar to other large commercial or utility scale development water quality permits that they receive. The agency did note that reviewing and evaluating data center PFAS monitoring data would represent a meaningful increase in staffing demands from their point of view.
The water resources protection permits, was there any discussion about the temperature of the water that's returned to the river?
I believe so. There are provisions which legislative council can speak to regarding the data cooling or the water cooling mechanisms used by these data centers and which kinds of cooling mechanisms trigger which kinds of permits a permit review with the agency. But I would defer to legislative council for details.
Are you familiar about it?
Yes, Jay.
Yeah, so I think that's right. They do need a discharge permit. I'm not, Mike O'Grady is our water expert, so he can tell you many details. But I think the collection of water and the discharge of water, all of that is covered, and you need different permits for each. So the temperature obviously is going to be a factor.
Thank you.
Finally, sections 5 and 6 would require the Public Utility Commission to report on projected regional renewable electricity generation market conditions to various committees of jurisdiction by January 15th, 2027. Section 6 would require the Commissioner of Public Service to consult with ANR and the Land Use Review Board to recommend a model for data center decommissioning to the committee's jurisdiction by December 15th of 2026. Both of these reports and recommendations, as the bills before you, would be accomplished with existing agency staff resources. There are no additional appropriations. I will note that Public Service Department had testified to needing additional contracting resources for their involvement in developing recommendations for data center decommissioning. But as the bill comes before you, there's no appropriations for that function.
Representative Woody?
Can you slide down to the beginning and wishes? And this is probably a question for Maria Royal. The data center uses or is able to use 20 megawatts or more of power. Would there be protection if there were multiple that use 18 megawatts? Or do you need to talk about that?
Yeah, so it's a good question that it did come up somewhat. It was actually one of the issues that House Environment, that did not have possession of the bill, but they did look at it, raised that very issue. Should the threshold be lower than 20 megawatts? I don't think there was a strong opposition to doing that, and Representative Sibilia could speak to that directly. I think what they were looking at, though, is specifically regarding data centers, that 20 megawatt threshold seems to be at least as far as I've seen, kind of the lowest threshold with respect to state or federal regulation of AI data centers specifically. Whether there might be others that are lower or other large load users, some of these protections might automatically apply, but I can't say a lot more than that.
I'm just trying to get to the idea of if I'm a company and I say, oh, well, I have to follow the rules if I'm 20 megawatts or more, I'm going to put in 10 smaller 10 megawatts and get around this. I just hope that the PUC would be able to. Do we have to say anything about this now or?
What I would offer, and the reporter of the bill is here on the bench, but these are good policy questions. They're very outside of our jurisdiction on this bill, which is related to perhaps, possibly, maybe an increase in fee revenue, maybe. Any questions for James? Thank you, James. Representative Sibilia.
So just on one aspect of the decommissioning, so originally, I believe, Maria, we changed that actually. That it was a study that we had put in there, we did hear from the department. They were worried about that and having the contracts, but we changed it to just coming back with recommendations for us.
Rather than a study. Okay, thank you.
I have one question for Maria. Maria, I'm just looking at page 11 of the bill and about the report coming to the various committees. House Committee on Energy, Digital Infrastructure, Senate Committees of Natural Resources and Energy, and also Finance. Wondering.
Finance has jurisdiction over energy issues.
That's why I was asking. Yeah.
I think it's a question, I don't know what you said.
Oh,
Finance has jurisdiction over energy issues.
Oh,
so finance.
Financial.
That, yes, utilities generally. So, and some of the energy stuff they share with natural resources, but they do a lot of the utility regulation.
And so we weren't missing out. Thank you for looking out for us.
Appreciate it.
Anyone have any further questions?
Madam Chair, I would move that we find favorable H727.
Representative Kimball moves that we find H727 favorable.
I'll second.
Representative Burkhart seconds. Representative Maslin, can you just wait a minute to do that?
Yes,
Thank you.
you move faster.
Any discussion? Seeing none, if the clerk could please call the roll.
Representative Brannigan,
Yes.
I'll vote yes as Representative Burkhart, Representative Higley,
Yes.
Representative Polk.
Yes.
Representative Kimball.
Yep.
Representative Maslin.
Yep.
Representative Bodie. Representative Page is absent. Representative Wazazak.
Yes.
Representative Canfield.
Yes.
And Representative Kornheiser.
Yes,
We have voted the bill favorable 10-0.
thank you. Representative Bodie, do you want to report this?
Sure.
Thanks. Please, actually, okay. Thank you, everyone. See you at